Hey fellas, Meat Trapper here. Today I have a very special video because I'm going to demonstrate a technique that I have never seen illustrated on video before. What I'm going to show you is how to make a snare out of a single piece of aircraft cable without the use of any double ferrules, no stop buttons, no snare locks, no whammies or snare supports, nothing. Just a single piece of cable. The reason why this is such an incredibly valuable technique to know is if you were in a grid down situation or a resistance or evasion situation and you needed to make an emergency survival snare, there are places that you can scavenge cable from, but the proper size double ferrules or snare locks are going to be very difficult to come by. Some of the places that you can scavenge cable would be old bicycles. You know, if you think about it, a bicycle has cable for the brakes, has cable for the gear shifters, all of that. Another thing that you could salvage cable from is a lawnmower. Old junk lawnmowers are usually going to have some form of cable for a throttle control or a safety release or something of that nature. Any type of old motor or vehicle that maybe had a manual choke was operated by a cable. And of course, downed aircraft have cable in them. In fact, the Mau Mau rebellion in Kenya in the 50s, of which President Hussein Obama's father was a member of, they would stake out downed British aircraft in the jungle for days to make sure that nobody was coming. Then they'd move in and they'd strip the cable off of the airplanes, and they called them trapping wires. So what I'm going to show you is a way to tie the knot to make a snare, and then I'm going to show you how to use it and how to set this type of snare up. So come on and let's take a look. This is what we're going to make. This is our survival snare. What we have is our piece of aircraft cable. This is, I believe it's about 7 or 8 feet worth of cable is what you'll need, depending upon how long you want to make your snare. We have our loop end, and then we have the termination down here, which is just a loop, and this will allow us to pass this around a tree and secure it. So we can secure this to the tree and make a catch without anything other than what you see here. The secret is in how to tie the knot that forms the snare lock. Now the first step is to get a piece of cable. The longer the cable, the better. What we're going to do here is we're going to back up about 8 or 12 inches from the end of the cable, and we're going to form our loop as shown. Now what you're looking for is a loop that's about 1 inch in diameter, and just make that first curl through there so that you end up with something that looks like this. Now continue to loop the end of the cable through the knot as shown. What you want to do, you want to use as much of that free end of the cable as possible and make as many turns, as many loops through there so that you end up with something that looks like this right here. Now step 2 is to form the snare lock itself, and this is very, very important. Take a good look at this picture. What we're doing here is we're taking the long end of the cable and we're going to run it back through our loop. But look at how it's run back through. It comes underneath the coil or underneath the initial loop, so that if we were to pull this completely through, it would actually unravel one loop of the knot. So this is critical right here. Take a look at how that's routed back through and make sure you do that properly. Now continue to pull the free end of the cable through the loop until you have a situation that looks like this. What you want is about a 1/2 inch left sticking out, where you have that one loop about a 1/2 inch out. And remember, if you were to continue to tug on the cable, you would actually unravel one of the loops. So this right here is where you want to stop pulling when you have something that looks like this. Now the final step, and the most critical, is what I'm showing here. What we have to do is take the free end of the cable and we have to pass it through the snare lock as shown. Notice that on the primary loop, the multiple strand loop, we're going underneath that loop, and then we're going over the single strand that we left exposed. If you do not do this correctly, your snare will not hold and it will not work. This right here, you have to end up with this situation for this thing to work properly. So take a look at this picture and study it. This is critical. Now this is what you want to end up with, the finished snare. You can see we have our primary snare loop, and then at the top we have our snare lock. Now let's take a look at a test you can perform to make sure that you've tied the knot correctly. Now the final step is to test the knot and make sure that you tied it correctly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to test this on my wrist. Now as I pull the free end of the snare and the loop tightens around my wrist, notice how the loop that formed, the standalone loop that forms the lock, pulls down across the middle of the loop and starts to tighten up. This is the key. If your loop ends up pulling across like I'm showing here, where it bisects the main loop, then you've tied the knot correctly. And what'll happen is the harder you pull on the cable, the harder you pull the loop shut, the tighter that's going to pull, and it's going to hold. It's not going to back out. And so that central line right there has to bisect the primary loop. If it does that, you tied the knot correctly. If it does not do that, you messed up and you need to go back and retie it. Now, of course, the final step is to get into the woods and let's set it. So let's take a look at how this thing actually works. All right, we've got our piece of cable. Let's go ahead and make a snare right here on the spot. Now I've got about, 8 or 10 feet of cable here. More, the better. It's not always possible to find that length of cable, but if you can, you're better off. Now I've got it uncoiled. I'm going to go back about a foot, and I'm going to make the first loop about 1 inch in diameter, and then I'm just going to work my way around over and over and over again. Oops. Till I've got as much of it as I can looped around. Oops. That last little pigtail always wants to fight you. Now, I'm going to come back on the same side of the loop that this end is on. Pull it almost all the way through. Stop about right there, about 1/2 inch. If I were to continue pulling, it would unravel. Now get the free end, put it back through. At that point, there's my snare. When this pulls, you can see that the top portion right there, that's going to pull down across the middle of the main loop. Now, you can see that's real loose. So I can vary the tension on what it takes to activate the snare by how hard I pull that down. Now, it's a little better. That's what we're looking for. Now we have to attach this to the tree somehow. I don't have any fence staples or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come out probably about 2 feet, and I'm going to make a little bit bigger loop for the termination end. maybe 1.5 inches, 2 inches. Let's see. Something like that. Now, what I'm going to do, we're going to go set it, and I'm going to put this through here and connect it to the tree. So let's go do that. Now we've got a game trail running right beside these trees. This is where we're going to place our snare. Now the first problem we have to solve is we have no snare support. We don't have a fiberglass support pole. We don't have a number 9 wire. We don't have a 14 gauge wire. We have to have something to hold our snare open. What we're going to use is a split stick. Now I've just peeled this off of a willow. Let me sharpen this down because this ground is super hard with the drought. So we got to find us a place where we can put this in the ground, and we want the split facing across the trail. Something like that. Now the next thing we have to do is attach our snare to the tree. We're going to do that. Remember, we put a terminator loop in the far end, and all we're going to do is pass the snare end through that. Cinch that up. Give it a good pull. Make sure that's on there good. Okay, now that we've got it attached to the tree and it's nice and firm, let's take our snare, and remember, you see how easy that lock drops? That's a little bit too fast. So what we want to do is we want to pull that down and snug it up just a touch. You have to play with it. Every cable is going to be different. And then we stick that down in the split stick so that it'll hold it. Let's see, let's take a look. Okay, I cleared some of this out, so hopefully it'll show up a little bit better. I'm having a hard time seeing it through the screen, but there's our snare. So you can see we have our snare loop, and that would be a good set for a coon, fox, cat, small cat, whatever you're looking for. You're going to have to adjust the size of the loop and the height accordingly. There's our snare lock, and you can see there's our split stick snare support, and then that is terminated on the tree just like that. Completely field expedient survival snare built from a single piece of cable. Now remember, the critical part of this snare, to make sure that you've constructed it properly, is when you pull it tight, that has to be bisecting the center of the loop. That's what holds it and locks the snare. That's your snare lock. If yours isn't doing that, where it's holding the pressure, when you release it, you've made a mistake tying the knot. That is success right there. So that's how you can make a complete functional aircraft cable snare out of a single piece of aircraft cable. No double ferrules, no stop buttons, no snare locks, no snare supports, nothing. Just a single piece of cable. Hopefully you'll never have to do that, but if you should find yourself in a situation where there are no other options, now you know how to put food in your mouth and food on the table for your family with a single piece of cable. Now, that's nowhere near as effective as a modern professionally made snare. That's why you don't see me using that. Believe me, if I've got snare locks, I'm going to use them. But just keep that in mind, and as you're going about your daily business, think about sources of cable. When you're passing a junkyard, when you see some trash, always be thinking about scavenging and scrounging, and how you can use stuff like that in a survival or a grid down situation, because let's face it, for most of us, trash is everywhere. We might as well learn to make the best use of it. Thanks for watching. I hope it was useful, and hope you have a great season.